All right, mic check. Can everybody hear me? All right, we've got 10:15. We'll go ahead and start the work session. Work sessions are an opportunity for board members to discuss issues informally with staff and invited guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions and discussion, but there's generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meetings held twice monthly. We have 3 items on the work session today. We have the county manager update, community plan updates, and then the evaluation of county surplus property for housing. So we'll go ahead and get started and turn it over to our county manager, Don Boone.
Thank you, Chair Coelho, members of the board. Actually, the first item is going to be really quick because I really don't have an update for you today. We've been having lots of conversations and a lot of things are in progress, but I'll provide a more thorough update at our next meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, County Manager. We'll go ahead and get right into our community plan updates. And I'll turn it over to Gail Henriksen, who's our Community Development Director, to start this. And Gail.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Board. Again, for the record, Gail Henriksen, the Community Development Director. I'm also here today with Julia Decker, our Planning Manager, and Ian Sisson, Senior Planner. And we wanted to bring back to your board the 6 community plans. And over the past year, staff has been working to make continued revisions to these plans. Some of that was based on Land Use Council review and comments that we received back from Beery Elsner. Some of it is direction and comments and input that we received from your board over the past year, going back to September of 2022. And so we've taken this time to really incorporate all those recommendations and revisions, to reorganize the plans, to make them more readable and make them flow better. We went again through the policies and the materials to eliminate duplicate material or duplicate policies, and then also to do the shall should look again at our plans, and then to really take some extra care to look at how items were stated, were they subjective or objective, and to try and clarify that as well and clean that language up. So we're really here today to answer any questions you have, to listen to your direction and your input, and then based upon that, we would either go back and continue revising the plans, or we would begin the process to schedule them for the public hearings before the Planning Commission and your board. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm just here again with Julia and Ian to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. I see that Commissioner Bangs has a question. Commissioner Bangs.
Yeah, so basically I look at the general policies and I see policy A, policy B, and policy C, and I would like a policy D to kind of mimic what policy B is, which is fishing as a traditional industry in the lifestyle of the Northeast County. I think forestry should also be added to that, and that it should be preserved and promoted, mainly just because 30% of our county's, jobs are related to forestry currently. I know that trend may be changing, but I feel like that, if we're going to be calling out a traditional industry, that one is also a fellow traditional industry.
Thank you, Commissioner Banks. We can certainly add that policy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Banks. Any other questions at this time? Okay, Gail. Not seeing any.
Okay, then would I be correct to take this as board consensus to continue moving forward with the addition of policy D and start scheduling these for public hearings?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
I'm giving you a high five.
I'll high five you back. Thank you so much.
Chair Coelho, this is obviously going to be a lot quicker meeting than your board may have anticipated. So.
Yeah, that doesn't break my heart. That's fine. Appreciate being efficient, and thank you to our planning Department and Community Development Department for all their hard work in putting this together. We'll move on to the next item, which is the evaluation of county surplus property for housing. And we have Lisa Gertler, housing manager, available. So I'll turn it over to Alyssa.
Board, thanks for having me. I am going to continue with this short presentation. I have 5 slides to share with you, and I'll pull those up right now, and we'll go through the evaluation of county property for housing suitability. Okay, can you see it?
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to quickly, as I submitted in the packet to you, there's a memo with a chart of 25 properties that we evaluated, county surplus properties, to determine how suitable they might be to build housing. And just to remind you of how we got to this point, the county identified over a number of years some property that would be considered surplus. In 2021, the county hired Angelo Planning to assess some of those properties, looking at their development feasibility. Last year, the county made available through a request for expressions of interest 31 properties that could be developed for affordable housing. There was some interest, but only the properties in Seaside moved forward, and the county transferred those properties to Seaside. And then what we realized is, due to some of the concerns that were raised about some of those properties, that additional assessment was needed to determine some of the issues that would be related to developing housing on these properties. So when I came on board, I looked at the existing work and worked with the county GIS staff to look at all of our properties and basically get a sense of their development characteristics, slope, access, transportation, wetlands, other environmental constraints, ownership, etc., configuration. I went and looked at all the sites, walked on them to the extent possible, met with city staff in the appropriate cities to talk about their interest and sort of their knowledge of the site or any other issues that might be arising for each of the sites. And then also just had some sort of feasibility conversations with a range of developers in terms of, is this something that you would consider developing? What are the issues? What are the challenges that you see? And as a result, of the properties we looked at, we found 4 properties that had what I would call high suitability for housing, that are well configured, have access, have minimal environmental constraints, and are served by cities. So 1 in Gerhardt, 2 in Warrenton, and 1 in Astoria. We also found 2 more in Warrenton that are small, very small parcels that are quite wet, but with the right configuration, you know, a single family house or a smaller development could occur. We also did a little deeper dive on the Arch Cape properties, and what I'm calling the only properties, but are really the county public works properties up on the hill there behind the county public works yard. And what I want to say is, low suitability doesn't mean no suitability. It just means it's more complicated, more expensive to build a road, you know, handle the environmental issues, etc. All of these are developable with, you know, the right amount of money and the right amount of will. But it makes sense to focus on the ones, especially if you're thinking about affordable housing, that have the least constraints. And so I'm already on my last slide, which is great. Wanted to talk with the board about sort of next steps, which is, how would the board like to see us proceed here? We've had some conversations about whether it makes more sense to move away from the request for expressions of interest community-wide and focus more on transferring to cities, since cities are the ones who have to serve, govern, permit, and ultimately facilitate the development. They also have more local knowledge of their conditions in their communities, but we've also heard that there's interest by things like school districts or other affordable housing developers. So that's, I see one of you already might want to answer that question, which is great. And then I'll just ask the other question, which is, do we want to also look at additional properties that the county owns to do additional evaluation of other properties? And with that, that is actually my last slide. I will stop share and take any questions.
Thank you, Manager Gertler. So Commissioner Banks?
I mean, I would be interested in potentially transferring properties to developers if it checks all the, you know, affordable housing boxes and grant boxes and so on and so forth, or other entities outside of cities. I think it might be a little bit more of a convoluted idea, but and a little harder. But I still think, with our direction of improving our housing stock in the county, that we should probably try to pursue as many options as possible. In regards to the lower feasibility of development, my curiosity is then potentially breaking apart those parcels and seeing what the limitations are in specific parcels. Is it slope or is it a road? One is easier to deal with than the other. And so being able to kind of split off the potential constraints of those individual properties and say only in an arch cape. But those are just my thoughts. Thank you so much. Very, very.
Thank you. And I think that is an appropriate next step if we wanted to really look at some of those lower feasibility sites, is to do kind of a development envelope. What would be feasible to build here, have a development firm sort of look at siting and understand what road access might be needed, what environmental issues. And that could certainly be a next step, is build out some development scenarios to see what it would take.
Yeah, thank you. Good question, Commissioner Toyoka.
Good morning. I just had a question on, especially some of the less adaptable lands. Can we utilize those, transfer to cities or entities to utilize for density, that we can actually create higher density housing in areas that are more developable right now? And if these have permanent challenges, can't we transfer those so they could have that, increase the density of housing in suitable areas?
Well, I'm glad our community development staff is on this line, because the idea of transfer of development rights is a really interesting idea, and one that we've talked about in the county and with cities, in terms of moving the undevelopable entitlement to the developable entitlement. And that's certainly something that, is a tool that is used in planning. It's worth noting that the Arch Cape sites aren't in a city, and so that would have a different governance, which again, our community development staff can speak to. But for example, the ones in Astoria could certainly be, Astoria could look at a transfer of development rights mechanism if that was something that made sense. And so I think that's a really excellent suggestion, and I can certainly talk with Community Development Director Henriksen offline about how we might pursue that.
Thank you.
I had a question kind of on that as well. Is it, I know that Warrenton has the density transfer set up within the city limits. Is there any discussions about doing it outside the city limits into county or unincorporated properties, or has that been a discussion at all?
That is actually a question for Gail, in terms of whether that's something that the county is looking at as a tool for facilitating development and transferring development rights to places where it's more suitable for development. I haven't been involved in that, but I imagine there have been some thoughts. So I'm going to turn that one over to our community development director.
Thank you. So the county already does have a transfer of development rights program, and a lot of that density and those units are encouraged to be transferred up to the Clatsop Plains area. And it is something that we could look to expand to other areas as well. But primarily that's where those transfers have occurred, is in the Clatsop Plains.
And these are development rights within the county, unincorporated county, being shifted to another area of the county, not necessarily within cities or incorporated areas.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Alyssa, do you want to pull up your two questions again? Make sure that we've got everybody kind of weighing in on it.
So my two questions are, and I think I've already gotten some feedback on the first one. Is the board interested in looking at only transferring to cities or looking at developers and special districts? And it sounds like the feedback is, let's look at all the options to try to figure out how to facilitate development, which makes great sense. And I
think that's the consensus, unless anybody else. Commissioner Webb is also here. Commissioner Webb, did you have any input, feedback on this?
Thank you. I'm sorry. I for some reason, I'm having trouble getting on our meetings and I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but Yeah, I actually have talked with with Alyssa about some of these properties, and one of the suggestions I've made is that I really do think we should actively talk to the school districts and some of our other large employers like the hospitals about land, either using our land or doing some joint ventures with them about creating housing that maybe would be specifically targeted toward our new hires. You know, often, I mean, we've all had the experience of hiring people who come here and then say, gee whiz, I can't find a place to live. And I have spoken with Eric Thorson about that and with Craig Hoppus, and they were both very interested in something like that. So I think that would be another thing that we could put on Alyssa's plate to consider those things. There is a stretch of land between just east of Shively Park and going all the way to the middle school that is where it's a stretch of connected parcels that are owned by either ODF, the county, or the school district, and excuse me, and Astoria, and the city of Astoria. So it is kind of a stretch of land that I'd love to have us explore. So I think, you know, my feeling is let's go forward. Let's not just look at county-owned land. You know, let's look at other, I think, joint venture type opportunities, and find these things wherever we can.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Webb. And it sounds like you've heard from the commission that we want to open it up and make it available to other interested parties. So fantastic.
Right.
And what was question number 2?
Any next steps in terms of additional properties to look at, which I think Commissioner Webb just spoke to? I know I'm having conversations with the county manager and county assessor in terms of additional properties that may be considered surplus that could also undergo a similar evaluation. And really, I think what the point of coming to you here is to sort of get a green, yellow, red light to pursue the transfer of the properties that are deemed most suitable for development and work on some of the addressing the development constraints. And I do think this transfer of development rights is also a great next step in terms of maximizing the developability of the property we do have to work with.
Yeah,
so
I agree. I think green light for me at least. And Commissioner Bangs?
I mean, if we're looking at properties outside of county ownership, I know that Napa School District has a large parcel across the highway from the actual school district. And I have in the past had conversations with board members, but also the superintendent about a potential of housing development for teachers. So I'm just putting it out there. If we're going to step into that forum a little bit, I would like you to reach out to the Napa School District.
Great suggestion. And one of the things I realized is that school districts have their hands full doing their mission as they are, and they're not all in the development business. But that may be one of the things that the county can help provide capacity is doing some of the back end work to facilitate development, partnerships, investment that can lead to development on school district properties. So that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Bangs. County Manager?
Chair Quayle, members of the board, I just want to also just put in the back of your minds that, you know, as the county holds these properties, as they reveal themselves as something that may be best surplus, then, you know, part of our goal always is to manage the surplus list, certainly hold on to those properties that have some additional public potential, but also to put those others back on the tax roll and let the private side decide what may or may not be the highest and best use for those properties. And so I just wanted to let the board know part of this is going to be certainly taking advantage of those properties that provide an opportunity in a fairly short time frame, which are the ones that are really kind of the high, you know, there's not a lot of complications. I mean, every bit of public housing or affordable housing comes with a subsidy component to it. And so cost of development matters. And so we've identified a handful of properties where development would be easier than others, and those might be suitable for some affordable housing potentiality. But there's a lot of others that at some point, if they can't be leveraged for some other purpose, we might be coming back to your board and saying, you know, this might be a good time to surplus this and put it back on the tax roll. So put it back into private ownership. So I just wanted to throw that out. It's always a balancing act for us about how to get properties off the inventory back onto the tax rolls, but still use those properties for a public purpose that makes sense. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, County Manager. Commissioner Toyoga?
Oh, I was just, County Manager pretty much addressed it. I was just going to comment that we wanted to make sure that the county's a facilitator, you know, and then secondarily that, you know, we're not developers. We want to just facilitate development, but getting those properties, if they have no other suitable purpose, get them back on the tax rolls. And County Manager just covered that. That's why I lowered my hand because he hit the tie there.
Agreed. Commissioner Banks?
I just wanted to put out there a bit of concern regarding South County workforce housing, and that we kind of keep an awareness. I know that none of our properties that were high on the, list of ready to go are not in South County. And so I just think about our Cannon Beach and, community members down there that they're having to commute sometimes over an hour in order to get to and from work. And so just a reminder, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Banks. Any other comments at this time? Questions for our housing manager? Alyssa, do you have the direction that you need? Okay.
Yes, which is keep going and look for more.
Yes.
And also follow the advice of the county manager, which is if it's not something we can do housing on, let's move it in a different direction. So
Absolutely.
This was a super helpful conversation. I appreciate all your feedback. Thank
Right.
you.
We appreciate all you're doing. And thanks so much. And we don't have anything else on our agenda. So this is going to be a very short meeting. I'll let you guys have some time back to the rest of your Wednesday. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you.